We're going to hear from Keegan Johnson about the Unstoppable Charity. In fact, I would say we're going to hear from the Unstoppable Keegan Johnson.
All right, good morning, Global Genes. How's everybody doing today? See, that's just not going to work. We're talking about creating an unstoppable movement for rare disorders. We need to do a little bit better. So let me try one more time. Good morning, Global Genes. How's everybody doing today? Now we're ready to go. So that's the first step, energy. So the second thing, if we're going to create a little bit of an unstoppable charity, what I need you to do right now, and I'm going to give you probably exactly 47 seconds, is I need you to get up right now and go ahead and introduce yourself to one other person that you do not know, you have not met yet. And so you need to stand up, you need to move. You have 47 seconds. Ready? Go. "22 seconds left. Hey, Keegan Johnson, very nice to meet you. "10, 9, 8, make your way back to your seat. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, you should be sitting in your seat having met another rare advocate ready to go. Okay, so I want to get started. A few quick questions. How many people here are rare advocates, rare parents, rare patients? Just raise your hand. Okay. Now raise your other hand if you remember the day that you got the diagnosis, your child got the diagnosis, or you remember that feeling when you found out that there was some problem and you never ever got the diagnosis. Raise your hand if you remember that. And that, beyond anything else, is kind of that feeling that really brings us all together here in terms of this community. So I'm going to share just a little bit about my story. So this is my son, Dante, when he was born. And I'll never forget the day that we got the diagnosis, because it was actually literally my 30th birthday. And we'd been in the hospital only for 3 weeks, getting a bunch of different tests, everything like that. And they pulled us into a room, and we were at a hospital that was a teaching hospital. So what that meant is we were sitting down at this great big boardroom table, and there was the chief of pediatrics, then there was a pediatrician, there was the head nurse, there was 2 or 3 residents, all sitting around the table, and the geneticist to my left, my wife to my right. And I remember sitting there after being in the hospital for 3 weeks getting all these tests, and the geneticist turned to me and he said, "Well, we have a diagnosis. Your son has Prader-Willi syndrome." And I remember sitting there thinking, okay, so what exactly does that mean? And he went on to say that his growth is going to be delayed, his speech is going to be delayed, he is literally always going to be hungry, and he's never going to be able to have children. And I remember sitting there, and I started to hear my wife to my right start to cry, and I'm just trying to process it, trying to make sense of it, and the only thing I could think of is I turned to him and I said, "Okay, well, what about his cognitive abilities?" And he said, "Well, those are going to be delayed as well." And that was our introduction. And I remember later that day, we stayed over at the hospital, my wife and I, and we were crying and talking and trying to figure it out and trying to understand how is it that we're going to have a son who's literally going to be starving all the time because he can't feel full. How are we going to deal with that? And my wife said, "Well, what's going to happen?" And I turned to her and I said, "You know what? Everything's going to be okay." And she said, "Well, how do you know what's going to happen?" And my answer, for whatever reason, was, you know what? I have no idea what's going to happen. But I do know that right now we have a choice to make. So we can choose to believe that our life is over, that we're never going to be able to socialize, that our child is never going to be able to be happy, he's always going to be in pain. Or we can make a choice to believe that we can make a difference. Now, I still have no idea what exactly is going to happen, but by choosing to believe that we can make the difference, that sets us up for success. And I can tell you, we made that choice, and a few months later, we knew we wanted to get involved. No idea about fundraising, no idea about research, no idea about charities. We just wanted to do something. And I came home from work, and my wife said, well, I booked a park, we're running a walkathon. And that was it. Okay. So we had just got married a couple years earlier, so of course the natural thing is we still had the wedding list. So we had a booked park. We literally went to the wedding list, and we sent out invites to all the people and said, hey, come to this park. And I can tell you, we said we wanted to raise about $15,000 just to do something, didn't know what it was. And that year, which was about 9 months after Dante was born, we ended up raising, you see the check there, for $50,000 in our first walk there. Simply because we made a choice to believe that we could make a difference. And what's interesting is, once we made that choice, then now we've set it up where we allowed other people to make that choice. So we took our little one small step walk, and since then, working with the whole community around the world, and we have our executive director here who's driving it, we raise over $1 million every year, and we've raised over $5 million for Prader-Willi syndrome research. And I can tell you that most of that is traced back to simply making a choice to believe that we could actually make a difference. So what are we going to talk about today? We're actually going to talk about how we actually make this happen. What are the 10 steps to really engage our community? So we have a lot of stuff to go to. We broke it down into sort of 3 different sections. How do you create that momentum? How do you grow your movement? And how do you sustain this? I can tell you a little bit about my background. I ran an e-commerce company for 8 years, kind of in the tech world and doing that. We started the charity in Canada, worked with the whole Prader-Willi syndrome community. And now I'm getting a chance to work with a lot of different charities in terms of speaking, consulting, coaching, really trying to create that movement to take it to the next level. So you don't have to write it all down. We'll show this a couple times to get back to it. So the first step, and this actually may be the most important thing that you're going to hear from this session today, is you have to get the foundation right. All these other things we're going to talk later, if you have the wrong foundation, it's not going to work. And the foundation comes down to 2 simple things. What's your mission and what's your mindset? And you got to get that right. So the first thing, it's interesting, when we talk about the mission, we actually did some surveys, and this is kind of the easiest way to increase your fundraising by 50%. People, fundraisers that could repeat the mission of their organization raise 50% more money. So now the question to you is, number 1, what is your mission? And how many of your fundraisers, how many of your members, your donors, could tell you what that mission is? If I went and asked them and said, hey, what's your mission? Can they actually say what it is? Because what we find is you look at it, and the mission statement is kind of like 1 or 2 paragraphs. And it's very difficult to read. And even when you talk to the executive director and the board, everyone's like, well, we do a lot of things around the rare disorder, and we do this. It's like, but what is that mission? And that's, kind of the clearest example is to put a man on the moon. All of a sudden, you have a very specific objective that can start to galvanize your community. So if you don't have that, you can run all the fundraising campaigns you want. People don't know what you're doing. So I have to commend our people here at Global Genes for what they've done. Because if you look at that, I don't know where Nicole is in the room, right at the back there. Give her a round of applause. Because if you say the mission of Global Genes is to eliminate the challenges of rare disorders, that's something that right away, every parent, every person with a rare disorder says, I'm in. I am in, absolutely. That's what I want to do. Now you've opened the door. If you don't have that, if you have a paragraph, people don't even know what you're doing. So what I want you to do is think about your mission now. Can you remember your mission? I mean, write it down. And the key is you only have 10 words. Your mission cannot be longer than 10 words. And for us, it sucked because we're Prader-Willi syndrome. That's 3 words right there. This is problematic. We're in trouble. You only have 10 words. So I was pretty excited because, and I didn't create our mission, but I love the mission. And the mission is to eliminate the challenges of Prader-Willi syndrome through research. And we ask our people at every conference over and over to repeat that. We give out prizes for people who can tell us the mission. Our community knows what it is. And I was pretty excited because ours is under 10. I had a chance to talk with the folks at PPMD, and we were having a conversation back and forth, and said, okay, great, well, hey, guys, what's your mission? And they said, to end Duchenne. I was like, okay, that's less than 10 words. But think about that. Everybody in that community knows absolutely what they're doing. They know why they're participating. They're here to end Duchenne. If you don't want to end Duchenne, don't talk to them. That's not what they do. But if that's what you want, that's who you want to work with. So if you haven't figured out your mission yet, you're working with it, here's a pretty easy way that you might want to take. Because there's so many commonalities. You look at to eliminate the challenges of and insert the name of your disorder. And that's something that you can now go to every person in your community and they will be able to repeat that. And the last little caveat I'll put here is specialization. Because what we do from our foundation is we focus on research. And that's clear. If you want to eliminate the challenges through research, then we're your people. If you want to do it through another mechanism, then you should talk to another group. So the last step I'll say is if you focus in a certain area, say, look, we do it through research. Or you say, we want to eliminate the challenges of XYZ disease through support. Whatever it is, because now everybody knows who they're working with and everybody knows what you're in it for. So that's the first step. You got to get the mission right. So, who can tell me who these crazy guys are? The Cure, round of applause. The Cure, and that was pretty quick. I've done this their favorite band. So this is an interesting thing to talk about because a couple years ago when you talk about genetic disorders and diseases, no one wanted to talk about a cure. It's completely impossible. But it's still a word that's really interesting. So we go out and we talk to communities and say, end Duchenne's like, hey, we want to end Duchenne. Are we going to create a cure? What about Prader-Willi syndrome? Are we talking about a cure? And it's something that this is where you got to get that mindset in terms of what you're trying to do. And what I want to do is I want to just walk you through a pyramid to think about it. Because you have to get yourself crystal clear in your mindset of what you're trying to do, and then you have to get your community. So what I'd say is at the top, if for you it's completely relevant to say, I'm here to create a cure, then you go for that. Because that is what you're here for, and you make it clear. I can tell you for me, I can't stand up here and say congruently that we're here to create a cure for Prader-Willi syndrome. And it's not a judgment, good or bad or whatever, but I can't say it congruently. But what I can say is we are absolutely committed to eliminate the challenges of Prader-Willi syndrome. And if you'd say, is it possible to eliminate a challenge? I'll tell you, absolutely. Actually, I can't imagine us not doing that. I can't tell you when. We're working on that. But I can't imagine us not eliminating that. So if that's what you believe and if that's congruent, then that's what you need to communicate. But the last step is really important because you need to get your community to a point that everybody believes that you can do what you're talking about. So if it's not relevant for them to say they're going to eliminate a challenge, the last step is to say it's possible. And that's something that everybody can hang on to say it's possible to eliminate a challenge. I'm not saying I'm going to do it 100%. I'm not saying when. But everybody can walk in and say, you know what? It's possible that we eliminate these challenges for XYZ Foundation. And that's the beginning of the mindset that you need to create. So I had a chance to speak at a number of different conferences, and at one of them, there was a man I talked to, and this is a degenerative disorder, which is kind of, we all have a lot of challenges, and this is kind of its own special part of challenge where you have something where you start with a certain amount of capability, and then it degenerates, and then you lose it, and then you lose it. So this was a degenerative disorder. And there was a man there who had a daughter with this disorder and did a lot of work and fundraising and research. And I talk a little bit about the word hope. And what he was telling me is there's a lot of people that he was talking with saying, hey, your daughter's going to die. Like, that's actually just the reality. And what you're doing is you're starting to create false hope because you're going out and telling people that this and that's going to happen. So you shouldn't be going around creating this false hope, and that's just not fair to people. And he told me something that I will never forget. And this is a man whose, daughter is potentially going to die. And he said, there is no such thing as false hope. It doesn't exist. You either have hope or you don't. And it was so profound. And he went on to say, you know what? If you ask me logically, I'll tell you, yeah, my daughter is probably going to die. And she's probably going to die in the next couple of years. But you know what? My daughter's alive right now. And I'm going to do something about it. And that's something that just blew me away, because so many times we sort of dance around this. And there's this question about false hope and what are you doing? So my response is, are you actually really doing what you're saying you're going to do? Do you have hope to do it? Because if you don't, pack up and go home. Let's not waste any time. But if you have hope to do it, then you got to get out there and you have to convince your community and tell them this is our specific plan and what we're doing. So speaking of planning, this is a little cartoon that my wife likes. And the little guy on the left, they're talking about the plan, says, why did Moses wander in the desert for 40 years? And the lady says, because even back then, a man wouldn't stop and ask for directions. And if you think about it in planning, we have so many of our organizations that kind of year after year, we're kind of wandering in the desert. And we're doing a little bit, we're doing some good work. And the question is, but do we actually have a plan to make it happen? So we have a lot of stuff to cover. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here. I think we actually have a strategic planning session where we'll talk about that in the deep dive. But I'll leave you with one quick thing, is if you're struggling with it, even creating a plan to create a plan is a plan, if that makes sense. Because you're talking to your community. They're now bought into your mission. And what they're going to do is they're going to show up and say, yes, I want that. What do we do? And if you tell them, well, I actually don't know how we're going to eliminate the challenges, now you've wasted the whole momentum. So you want to tell them your plan. And if you don't have a plan yet, you can say, well, you know what we're doing? This is what we're doing to create a plan to eliminate it. And our research head did this a couple years ago, where what we did is said, hey, our plan is we're going to get 65 of the top researchers in the world and put them together to create a plan to eliminate the challenges. That was our plan. But people are like, absolutely, I'm ready to fundraise for that because I want that to happen. That is still a plan. So, and we'll talk about deep dive planning a little bit later. So, the next thing I want to talk about is storytelling. Anyone's heard about the hero's journey? Anyone? We have a couple literary people in the world. Yes, the marketing people as well. So, we can go through each of these, but at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you a little bit of story. I like to embarrass people. She's in the room. So, and it's actually about Susan Hedstrom. So she has had a son with Prader-Willi syndrome, and she came to one of our conferences, and and you've all been in a conference for your rare disorder, and the lady at the back with those big, huge eyes who kind of just got their child diagnosed with a rare disorder, just found out. Didn't want to talk to anyone. You could tell, although she's hiding it, she's been crying, just sitting there. And I remember seeing her, and my wife ended up going over and chatting with her, and that was the beginning, a mom of a child with special needs. And she had lost hope for her life, going through just trying to figure out what's going on. And what I can tell you is, from that point forward, the progressions that she went through, and she is actually now at the point where she is actually running our foundation. She's the executive director. She's run fundraising campaigns that have raised over millions of dollars for Prader-Willi syndrome research. And she's now not just doing our executive director, she does marketing, she's showing up on our research calls. So she's tapped into all those different skills. So how about a round of applause for Susan Hedstrom here? But I'm telling you this story for a reason. Because the hero's journey talks about every story. It's kind of like the Rocky story. Every story that's written goes through this, where you end up at the beginning with some sort of otherworldly challenge that you don't know what to deal with. Then you start getting involved, and typically there's some sort of mentor that's involved. You end up with this existential challenge that you have to fight through, and then you start tapping into your own personal skills, that you learn new powers and skills, and then the hero comes back sort of a changed person. And we have fundraisers that actually say, you know what, I've got my mojo back. But the real reason I'm telling you this is because the power of storytelling. If you're telling a story, we're programmed to understand things by stories. If you tell someone a story that starts with a person that's similar to them. So if you talk to someone, I'm going to tell you a story about someone who's a parent of a child with a rare disorder. And if that person has the same challenge, then the person who's listening to the story has to hear the end of that story. If you tell me a story of a person I can relate to, and they have the same challenge as me, I want to know how it ends, because I want to apply that to my life. And then the real key part is, what we're effectively doing is we're saying, look, here's the challenge that you have. Now you're going to end up getting your mojo back. And the way that Susan did it, the way that our fundraisers did it, is by getting involved in our organization. Effectively by fundraising, by volunteering. So we're not saying, you need to get out there and fundraise, you need to volunteer, you need to get involved or else we're going to fail. We're telling people a story about other people who found their inner mojo by getting involved in an organization. And that's something that you need to learn to do within your community. How can you identify those 3 or 5 people that have had that personal transformation? And how can you tell that story at a conference? How can you tell it in your emails, in your fundraising campaigns, so people can relate to that and understand how they can be transformed by getting involved in your organization? Okay, so that's the first part. We did create. So now we're going to move on to grow here, recruiting, power of people, momentum. But we need a little break here. Okay, so what I want you to do here is I want you to get up, and this is, I know a lot of you people know Carrie here, and I want you to find someone, and I want you to give them a hug. It's pretty hard, but it needs to be a real hug. This can't be, I just met you and I don't really like you. This can't be, I need to be polite and I'm going to give you a hug. Get up right now, find someone and give them a real hug. No joking. Oh, sorry. Okay, back to your seats, back to your seats. Whoa, easy in the back corner there with the hugging. We are only hugging. Nothing more. All right, now the reason I'm telling you is not just because it feels good to hug, which it does, but the number one step in creating momentum, when you talk about you've got the foundation, now getting your foundation to grow, is you need to welcome people with open arms. You need to welcome people as if you give them this real hug. And one of the things that Global Genes, this actually was taken the other day, and they've done a great job, is I showed up, and as soon as I walked in, Carrie ran over, Nicole ran over, and gave me a great big hug, welcomed me into the foundation. And too many times we set up our events where there's a registration desk, or even our fundraising events, where we have, registration, and we have volunteers that, maybe kind of are high school kids who just sort of showed up and actually don't know anything about our foundation. And what do they do at the fundraising event? Oh, can you hand in your file? Yep, great. Here's your name. Thank you. Okay, yeah. Or a gala where we take their number and say, yep, you're at table 23. How is that welcoming our people to our foundation? What you want to do is you want to take your most engaging people and you want them to be the first people that people see. So when that donor, when that member walks through to the registration desk, what we do is we have actually our fundraising events, and we have all our people there, and if someone comes in and they've raised $500 or whatever, we ring the bells. Everybody's ringing the bells, and then other people are clapping. We're welcoming people to our foundation with open arms. And think about it, if you start doing that time and time again, that's how you're going to get the momentum going. The next thing, and this is borrowed from the political campaigns, is you have to leverage person-to-person recruiting. All the politicians, Republican, Democrats, whoever it is, are masters of it. Now, they have all the data, but what they identify is when they're going out to get someone to vote for their candidate, they're going to match. They're not going to send the 65-year-old single male to go talk to the 20-year-old, newly mom of a child. It's just not going to work. That's not how people relate. So you need to identify who in your foundation are going to help recruiting people and start matching them up. So you can start doing this person-to-person recruiting. So those are kind of the first two steps in starting to get your momentum going. So, people power. We're volunteer-based organizations at the end of the day. Nothing happens without our people. And there's a lot of things that we could talk about in terms of people power. I'm going to pick on one thing, and it's really that the leadership sets the tone. You people here are the champions. You're the advocates. You're setting the tone for your foundation. And what I want you to do is really take a critical look and think about what happens is your community, your movement, because there's no, hey, I'm going to pay you this bonus and do all this stuff, starts to take on your strengths, and it also starts to take on your weaknesses. And you really need to understand what you're sending out to the community. If we're not admitting our mistakes, if we're sort of cutting other people out of the pie and saying we're not going to work with them, all of a sudden your whole community is going to start to take the tone on that you set from the top. Okay, so this may be the most important thing that you're going to hear in the session here today. How many people, raise a hand, have heard about something called the goal gradient effect? The goal gradient effect. We got a few people at the back. Basically, it's a psychological principle that basically talks about people will put in more effort the closer they are to the goal. Very simple principle, but it's extremely powerful. So one of the studies that they did, it's a classic subway card. But what they did is they took a card that you had to stamp 10 times. And you visit 10 times, you get a stamp every time. And when you get it completed, you get a free sub, free coffee, whatever it is. So you had to do 10 things. They had another group that they asked to do 12 things. So you're doing more things, but those 12 people, they pre-stamped 2 of those spots. So you still only had to do 10 things, just pre-stamped, that's it. And what they found is the people that had pre-stamps completed their cards 20% faster. Just same thing, just by having it stamped. So now think about how you can start to relate this to your fundraising. How are you pre-stamping every single project that you're doing? So we all have we should have the fundraising thermometer in what you're doing. You need to pre-stamp that, right? When that goes out to your community, you need to have at least 20% of that pre-stamped. Whether you've got the initial donors, whether you've got the corporate donors, whatever, it needs to be pre-stamped. When you coach your individual fundraisers, when they set up their fundraising page, they need to pre-stamp every single individual page, right? So if I'm going to ask my friends and I say, hey, my goal is $500 and I get a little thermometer, I don't want to send it out, just with that $500. I want to pre-stamp it. Take my own donation, or if I know, my dad's going to do a donation, put it on there. And also, by the way, make sure your first donation is the largest donation. If you put a $10 donation, then everyone's going to say, oh, that's great, I'll give you 5. I'm a big donor, I'm going to give you 20. Right? Get someone who's going to put whatever large means to you, the largest donation there, and everyone's going to start to set the tone. So that's the goal gradient effect, but it goes one step further. Then they took this, and they actually did this with charitable giving. What they did is they took a foundation, and they looked at a whole bunch of lapsed donors. So these are donors who basically had donated before, so they were donors, but they'd stopped giving. And then they sent them out mailers. And the mailers, they said, hey, we got this great project, we'd like you to come back and donate. And on some of them, they said, we just want you to come back and donate. Some of them, they said, we want you to come back and donate, and we're 10% of the way there. And then in a third group, what they did is they said, we want you to come back and donate, and we're 85% of the way to their goal. And that was the only difference. They said, we're 85% of the way to the goal. The people that they told that they were 85% of the way there donated 130% more. So you talk about the power of increasing your fundraising simply by leveraging this, 130%. So I am not telling you to go out and lie to your donors. Do not tell them you're 85% of the way when you're just starting. That's crazy. But what I am telling you to do is you get to structure what the project is. You get to figure out how it is. So don't create this great multi-year project and all these parts when you're like, put it in phases. No, we're 85% of the way through phase 1. Oh, awesome. What is phase 1? You get to decide. It could be sending a letter out. We're 85% of the way through phase 1. Easy. That's how you're going to get this done. So how many financial people in the room? How many financial people? We got a few. Okay, so we got a tough financial question for you. So there's 3 unpaid debts. So the first one is $1,000, and it's at 20% interest. The second one is $100, and it's at 5% interest. And the third one is $10,000, and it's 10% interest. And the question is, so from your financial point of view, which one should you pay off first, second, and third? You want to pay off, from a financial point of view, the one that's on the highest interest. 20%, you're paying 20% interest every day you don't pay it. So you got to pay that off right away. Then the next one at 10% interest, and then the last one at 5% interest. So that is the financially sound way to do it. But we're interested in creating a movement. We're interested in creating a momentum. So for us, what we want to do is we want to cross things off the list. You want to pay off the smallest absolute dollar amount. So in this case, you'd pay off the $100 debt. And then you're going to tell the community, hey guys, we finished phase 1. Absolutely. Then you're going to pay off the $1,000 one. And you're saying, hey guys, we finished phase 2. We're almost there. Now you've got the community momentum. Now you're going. Now you can tackle that big project. If you put that big project first, you're going to get kind of halfway through it and everyone's going to be like, we're never going to get there. I'm done. And this is the important thing, you get to structure your projects for a year. So when you sit down and say, this is what we're going to do, what I want you to do is say, take the projects that you know you're going to complete, or better yet, the projects that you've already completed. You've already completed them. And you send it out and say, we're going to do these 10 things this year. Aren't we good? You send that out in January, February. Then March comes, you say, hey guys, we finished the first 3. You'd already done them. But now everyone's like, wow, these guys are really getting stuff done. Then you go back another 3 months and say, now we did 4, 5, 6. Now you start to create momentum in the community. By the time you get to the big stuff, everybody's going to be they're going to think that your organization is the best thing since sliced bread. Whew. Okay, we finished the second one. I want you guys to give yourselves a round of applause. We're coming down the home stretch here. Okay, we've created the momentum. Now we've grown it. Now we got to talk about how we're going to sustain this momentum. How are we going to do it? So the first thing is talking about revival. How many people here have an annual conference? This is probably the most important thing to your momentum, to your members, and to your fundraising, having that annual conference. And this is something that if you look at the multi-level marketing companies, they've known this for years. These are billion-dollar businesses based simply on having a revival. That's it. And so, yes, at your conference, we're going to talk about our symptoms, our challenges. We're going to talk about our research. We're going to give a status site. But we're also going to manage the emotion of our members. And what you need to be doing, if you're not doing it, you need to be able to get 50% of the people that show up at your conference to sign up to get involved. And we work with organizations that do 80, 90% and above, that people that show up leave saying, I need to get involved, I need to do something, I'm going to do fundraising, join a committee, whatever it is. But that's the thing that you need to do. So you need to structure your whole conference to get people manage their emotions and get them to sign up to be engaged. Okay, who can tell me who this is? Sally Fields. Unmistakable. You love me, you really, really love me. And we all know the power of recognition. And we do it a lot, but I'm going to give you a slight distinction that makes a huge difference. All recognition is not equal. And my question is, what are you recognizing people for? What are you recognizing people for? Because what happens is, whatever you recognize people for, that's what everybody does. So if you recognize people for their position, then everyone's going to want that position. I know there's a couple groups that I've talked to, and there's people that are kind of outside, and they're literally crying because they weren't literally the president or the vice president of the chapter, sub-chapter organization. And all the discussion was about, I'm the president, I'm the vice president, I'm this. That doesn't help our mission at all. You need to recognize people for doing things that you want them to do. And as soon as you shine that spotlight, hopefully publicly, in front of somebody who's doing what you want them to do, you're going to have a lineup of people who are going to say, that's what I want to do. And that's how you start getting people to move in the direction that you're talking about. So quickly, And we won't spend a lot of time on each of these, but there's a lot of challenges, outside of the financial, outside of the governance, the organization, that we're going to run into when we start creating this momentum. And I'm going to give you a very quick synopsis of these and what you need to do. So partnering, how many people have partnered or thought about partnering or run into difficulties partnering with other sort of rare genetic disorders? So it's a common thing that comes up. Hey, we're going to work with this group or not work with this group. And I got to tell you, the simple way to solve this or to make it work, and it's a difficult thing, is to go back to the mission. Because if you don't have a well-defined mission, or if they don't, it's not going to work, because you don't know what you're doing. But if you come back to the mission and say, hey, my mission is to eliminate the challenges of XYZ disorder, your mission is the same. All of a sudden, we have an opportunity to work together. And then if I say, hey, I'm going to do it through research, you're going to do it through support, now maybe there's a great way to work with. I can tell you there's a group in Canada, in Ontario, that their mission is to eliminate the challenges of Prader-Willi syndrome really through support. Ours is through research. And we're like the best of buddies now. We have conferences. They come to our conference. We go to their conference. We have booths at their fundraisers. They have booths at our fundraisers. We share people with them because there's no issue. If you want to eliminate challenges through research, then you want to talk to us. If you want to do it through support, then you want to talk to them. So that's the way to do it. Zero-sum advocacy, in some way it's related. But this is kind of the, hey, I'm a winner and you're a loser. And the only way that you're going to be successful is if the other group loses. Again, the answer there is to keep coming back to the mission. How many people here work with difficult people? Okay, now the other hand, how many people here are difficult people? I think there's more in this group. So it's a common challenge, especially in volunteer-based organizations. But again, the way to do it is you have to get out of the personal. It needs to come back to the mission. Because there's going to be people that you don't get along with, and there's going to be people that don't get along with you. But you simply have to ask the question, is what I'm doing, is what that person is doing, advancing the mission? And if the answer is yes, if there's someone that I detest, but I don't really detest a lot of people, so that's probably not a good word. But if there's someone that you don't get along with, but they're going to help eliminate the challenges of Prader-Willi syndrome, I'm all for it, because that's what I'm here for. And that's the only way to do that. Burnout is another typical challenge. And again, we talked about revival, decentralized leadership. Whenever you're talking about really creating the momentum, it can't all come centrally, because it's this whole command and control structure. So we've seen a lot of the success of different social movements by decentralizing it, but it comes with different leadership challenges. And the last one that I want to talk about is the free rider problem. Anyone know what I mean when I say the free rider problem? Anyone want to yell it, the answer? No, we're not there yet? So basically the idea is, let's take cancer. We'll pick on cancer for a second. So if I know that you're working really hard and you're doing a lot of fundraising to create a cure for cancer, then why should I bother? Because you know what? Once you create the cure, once you get the cure, I'm going to get access to it. So that's the free rider. I'm going along for free. I'm not going to put my time, effort, energy, family, friends, money. I'm going to let you do that. And it's probably one of the number one challenges that we run into that we don't even know, because that person doesn't even engage with us. They don't talk to us. So all these people are just sitting there saying, yeah, good job. Let me know how that goes. So the best way to address that is the last thing that we talk about, is creating a sense of urgency. And it comes back to that question of, if not now, when? So everything you need to do, whether it's a fundraising campaign, needs to have that sense of urgency. It can't be a research project that, we're going to fund next year or maybe when we get to it. It can't be rolling out this new support program that, it'd be nice to have. And if you talk again about the political guys, you've probably gotten those emails where they're saying, oh my God, the other political party is going to end the world. We need to raise money now to do something. And they both send the same thing, but they're creating that sense of urgency. And I loved what Pat said yesterday, and I don't know if she said it before, but it was beautiful where she said, we are all impatient patients. And I think a lot of the people here have that inherent sense of urgency. We need to make a difference now. But then if you look at it, sometimes our organizations don't have that sense of urgency. We kind of have it on an individual basis, but it kind of gets lost. And then we also say, but the rest of the community, there's other people that don't want to get involved. They don't want to have that sense. They don't have that sense of urgency. So the question is why, and what can we do about it? And what it really comes down to is fear. Because if you've gone through these different steps, you now have a person that's bought into the mission that says, I absolutely want to end Duchesne. They looked at your plan and they said, I believe that plan. That's exactly what we need to do. You've told them the stories, you've made a personal connection, you've motivated them. They're ready to go. They're ready to fundraise. They're ready to volunteer and make a difference. But that last step is they're afraid. And we've all been there. If I go ahead and I run this little fundraising campaign, what if it doesn't work? What if I send out emails and nobody comes to my event? That's the fear. And I love this quote from the founder of IBM. Say the fastest way to succeed is to double your failure rate. And what I can tell you is as a leader of the organization, if you are not failing, and if you are not talking to your community about your failures, then you're not moving fast enough. And what's going to happen is if you set the tone, remember we talked about that, if you go out and say, hey, this was the campaign that we ran, it was a fundraising campaign, this was the support campaign, this was the government, whatever it was, and you know what, it didn't work. But this is what we learned from it. This is what we're doing next, this is what we're rolling out. Now what's going to happen is your community is going to say, oh, you know what, don't worry about it. I know how hard you're working. You know, I'm going to help you out. We're going to go there. That's what they're going to tell you. But the real power is you are now giving them the ability to fail. Because you now publicly stood up and said, I made a mistake. I'm bought into the mission. I made a mistake. They're going to hear, oh, actually, you know what? It's okay here if I fail. You know what? I can go out and, no one's going to say, oh my God, I can't believe no one came to your fundraising event. What an idiot. Because think about that. Have you failed publicly? And if all you need to do is double your failure rate, and that's going to get us faster to eliminate the challenges, how easy is that? So this is the 10 steps that we talked about, and I want to leave you with a final thought. And my question here is, if you knew that you could eliminate the challenges of your disorder, if that was guaranteed, if you knew you could do that, and all you needed to do was raise $500, how many people could do that? It's got to be the easiest thing in the world. But it's the type of thing, when we think about it, if every person, and this is kind of that global genes promise, if every person with a rare genetic disorder just raised $500, that'd be $15 billion in a year across the US. So this isn't something that's impossible to do. And this is one of my favorite things. How many people here have heard of the Ice Bucket Challenge? And how many people here wish that they came up with the Ice Bucket Challenge? But the most beautiful thing, outside of the funding for ALS and the research, the most beautiful thing is it shattered all of those beliefs. Because any one of us could have done that. And there's no more, hey, I'm a rare genetic disorder, I can't do this. Why not? It shattered all those things, $100 million and counting. So when we talk about if we can mobilize the community and get everyone to just raise that $500, we're going to have $15 billion every year. And then we're going to go all the research that we talked about and say, hey, what could you do with $15 billion this year? And that's driving to the point, it is possible to eliminate these challenges of rare disorders. So thank you very much for your support. There's my information. There you go.